Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just call the special council meeting for the 11th of January to order. Quickly, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the city of Colwood lies within the traditional territories of Lekwungen-speaking peoples represented by the Kisipsum and Songhees nations who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. Item 2, approval of the agenda. May I have a mover and seconder to adopt today's agenda as presented? Okay. Councillor Grove and Councillor Ward. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion's carried. We'll move on. Public participation, no one. And seeing no one in the audience, move to item 4, unfinished business. There's no unfinished business from the special council meeting from January 8th. We'll go right into new business. 2024-2028 draft special initiatives. I'll turn it over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Mayor Kobayashi. Just while we're bringing up the presentation, tonight's focus will be on the special initiative presentation. You will hear from each of the city's service areas. We have approximately 50 budgets that we'll be presenting to you tonight. On the agenda package tonight, in addition to this presentation, we have also published an excerpt from the draft financial plan. That is that of the service plans, and those do include updated narratives that support these budgets we will be reviewing tonight. So just a quick recap, we have reviewed operating plans for each of the service areas. Last meeting, we reviewed reserve balances and we reviewed the city's 5-year capital plan. Tonight's focus will just be on the special initiative review, and then next week we will return with a review of the draft financial plan in its entirety. Similar with the previous meeting, at any time, please indicate if you have questions at all, and we will take pause. Consistent with the last budget presentation we have endeavored to reference the draft strategic plan with each of these budgets. And just a quick reminder, we define special initiatives or special projects as those that typically occur outside of routine operations. So we don't consider these budgets within our core operating budget, but rather they stand alone. These initiatives are typically funded through reserves or through grants, and consistent with the previous presentation, you'll see with each what the funding source is. And so with that, we will get started. First up, our Administration Corporate Services team, and I will turn it over to Marcy to provide a little background on the Accessibility Committee support budget that is before you.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. So the Accessibility Committee that was created was the Capital West Accessibility Committee, and it's comprised of 7 member municipalities. The funding for this is to go towards the accessibility plan that we're looking to do an RFP for. And we held our first meeting in November, our next meeting scheduled in April. And this work is expected to go on for about a year. And then we are hoping to turn it over to be a citizen-run committee. I don't know if there's any
I have a question.
Sure.
So this is a one-off, I believe, right? The 10,000. It's not a surprise here. So I guess the question actually is for you, Jen, because I had to make sure in my own head I understood this. The general operating surplus. That's not. Is that a budget line item that we're actually taking tax dollars and putting into it, or is it actually the surpluses that have been generated in the past plus the future? I have to clearly understand what that means.
Great question. I appreciate the opportunity to comment. From a budgetary perspective, it's prohibited to budget a surplus. So we do not budget to transfer into this funding source. However, it's not uncommon to generate a surplus for a variety of reasons that you hear us comment on when we bring forward quarterly updates. So we do accumulate a surplus, and we do use that as a funding source. This initiative here, while the initiative is new, council directed us to commit funding to support this in 2023.
Right.
And so at that time we did so. And we've now defined it as a standalone initiative.
Okay, thank you. No, I just wanted to make sure, because I thought kind of odd to have a budget line item called general surplus, but I kind of figured it wasn't, but I just had to make sure in my own head.
It is not a budget line item. However, it is one of our funding sources.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification.
So if no further questions on this one, the city does maintain within our budget funding to support contingency. Should we require this funding, we will be back before council to seek council resolve. In 2023, council did direct that we use some of this contingency should we require it to advance primary healthcare solutions, those works that are underway. And so currently right now that's the only potential spend of this contingency here. The next municipal election is scheduled for 2026. And so this financial plan does commit funding to support that activity in 2026.
So I have another question. So is this $55,000 per year for the next 3 years then? Or is this a one-off, or should we be spreading this out over the 3 years, or?
Great question. This is a one-off. This is the proposed spend on the municipal election. We do have sufficient sustainable funding for this activity every 4 years as it occurs.
Okay, so is it a normal thing? I'm just education for me. So is it a normal thing to do it the year after the election and to set aside the money then?
We set aside funding for a reserve for future operating expenditures. I can see this initiative is being funded through surplus, which is not sustainably funded. However, we do have sustainable funding in that balance.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll turn it back over to corporate services to comment on the next 2 initiatives, which are related to records management.
Thank you. So the records management is to try and streamline our practices and policies and procedures. We're striving towards becoming an electronic only system, hoping to get that soon. And we're looking at our existing classification system to make it a little easier for staff to comply with our legislative requirements to do our filing, and to make it easier for locating records, especially for freedom of information requests and things like that.
Sorry, question again. Sorry, I'm sorry, guys, because I'm just trying to really make sure I understand a lot of this. I have to take this stuff serious now. So is this like again a one-off cost, right? So if there's nothing else attached to this, you know, like we're gonna need more people once we implement this, and I guess this is the picture you don't get when you get something presented this way.
No, it won't require additional staffing to get this done. This would be getting consulting services to help us streamline these processes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
Oh, I think it just went by. Sorry, and the records management scanning has one that's been ongoing, and that's us trying to get our historical records put into electronic format.
Next.
So next up, you'll be hearing from our communications and engagement team on a number of the initiatives that they will be overseeing. First up, a new initiative, Living with Wildlife Community Campaign.
Good evening, Council. So what this budget is for, you might recall during our service review, both the communication and bylaw team, we highlighted wildlife safety as one of our priorities for this year. So what this budget would get us, an organization, a volunteer group called Wildwise. They would help us with our temporary signage when there's animals in the area. Also 6 pop-up events for the community, which would include educational flyers, review of permanent signage as well in some of our parks. And then also we'd like to lead it off with a council presentation as well. So as we're seeing more development close to forest, the disputed.
Quick question, sorry again. So just help me explain something to me right now. This is where I'm getting kind of confused. It's a small amount of money, right? So why wouldn't this go through grant and aid? Because we force a lot of stuff through grant and aid, and so we're putting this against surplus. I just want to know the criteria so I understand that.
Certainly, great questions. Preface this by saying the summary of budgets that you're hearing about tonight, this is the city spending funding. This is the city typically spending funding on work or initiatives that occur outside of routine operations.
Yes.
So these are one time. Many of these initiatives do span multiple years, but they're not recurring, so they're not integrated into the core. This is the city administration proposing funding to support our direction of receiving this service. It's not for us seeking a contribution to a group, but rather to engage a group for their services, a one-off. But this is not a group that has approached us seeking support. This is rather us looking to engage a group for their services in response to what we believe is a need.
Question now. No, I'm starting to understand the difference.
Yeah, but perhaps just at this note, I will note the excerpt from the financial plan that has been published on the agenda tonight. We do summarize these initiatives by service area because it is important to recognize there is capacity. You know, there's our team that oversees this work. And so there is a link between the work that's being proposed here and who's overseeing it. There was a comment made earlier with respect to records management. As you heard during service review, we are proposing increased staffing in that area, specifically a records coordinator. So there is related activity within operating budgets within service areas, which is why it is important as well. That financial plan document does pull this information together, both the special initiatives and the core operational activity of a given service area.
Okay, thank you very much for that explanation. Councillor Ward.
I just thought I'd pile on for fun here. No, I really am not. I am a little curious though. It is a nominal amount of money. It's not the money that interests me, but I did recall that at the UBCM conference, there were a number of vendor booths, if you will, there that were promoting living with wildlife programs and things. And the attraction, and I apologize, I don't think I've turned over the materials on it, but there was a lot of talk of provincial funding and things that are where I know there used to be a program called Bear Aware, and I just was quickly looking at it, and literally the headline is Living with Wildlife. It's now called Wild Safe BC, but it's the BC Conservation Foundation, and the province kicks in money on it. So, you know, I'm not opposed to this at all. I think we need it. I want to be clear about that. I think this is a great initiative, but if there's an opportunity to double our money or get the province to kick in something on this and leverage what's already there, I would just hope that maybe we take a look and see if we can, you know, get a little more bang for our buck. So thank you.
I'll maybe just respond to that. It's possible that Wildwise is receiving that funding, and we'll explore that, whether they're able to provide this service as a result of that funding or whether we could access that funding. Something to explore. Thank you. Thanks, Fanny. So the Household Prosperity Needs Assessment, on Monday evening, you heard the Household Prosperity Survey results. This is a follow-up initiative to interview or conduct focus groups or perhaps panels of interested residents. It says there are over 200 respondents. That's an error. It was about 160 respondents. About a third of the total respondents agreed to engage further and give more details. So this funding would support that initiative. The retail strategy and value proposition is one of the tactics described in the draft strategic plan to support business attraction and retention in Colwood. We have engaged a consultant to help us with this work. This group is working also with Oak Bay and with Saanich, so they are familiar with the area. They've also been involved in past OCPs in in our area, so they are quite familiar. And this will support a strong marketing plan going forward.
It's just a clarification. So the deliverables are the materials for marketing Colwood as a place to do business, correct?
That's what will result from this work. We will need to create the marketing strategy as a result of these products that we really receive here. And we may seek support to do that piece as well. But this really gives us the data to understand our community, to know what types of businesses we could successfully attract, what we should be working for, what kind of land base we have to support it. All of those details is what the retail strategy will give us. The value proposition will take that work and condense it into, well, engage the community and council and staff in condensing that into a really clear proposition that, you know, it's our tagline. From that work, we'll follow a marketing strategy and the products that we.
I'm clear. Thank you very much.
We now get into the volunteer aspect of our work. We'd like to offer council the option, a couple of options. So we've talked at length about a volunteer coordinator. The decision to implement the volunteer plan was deferred, as you know. That plan included a full-time volunteer coordinator. So what we've got on the table tonight are a couple of options for council to think about. We can support grassroots initiatives such as a beach cleanup and community cleanup team. So the idea would be to provide a $20,000 contract to an individual or group to support development of a group like this. If we flip the page, there are a number of these. A community garden group would be another. A Friends of Latoria Creek Park group would be another, so that we are providing the support for groups to establish themselves. And these are groups that we've heard through the Ideas Fair, through citizen survey, through comments from the public that people are interested in having. In addition to that, or apart from that, we could work to establish a part-time volunteer coordinator position. So I presented that a little bit clumsily, but I wanted to tie all of these options together for council to consider. My hope, communications team hope, would be that we could establish a volunteer coordinator to support the work of each of these groups as well as others in the city. I'll stop there.
Councillor
I think I'm
Ward,
making it
question.
Hey, Sandra, sorry, I was just looking for clarification. So when you talk about groups, we're talking like groups like Surf Rider Foundation and the Green Team and groups like that. Is that who you're referring to?
Well, so groups like that are already established and the city has strong partnerships with those groups, particularly the Green Team. What this is about is groups that aren't as well established yet. So we don't have a community cleanup team or a city-driven beach cleanup team. And people often ask the city, do you have the supplies to support a cleanup? We'd like to go around our neighborhood, and we don't always have the capacity to support that in the ways that we would like to. Same with community gardening. We hear a lot about people wanting to establish additional community gardens. And the Colwood Garden Society runs the community garden here at City Hall, but there isn't an established group to really support the work of expanding upon that. The other groups are similar. Friends of Latoria Creek Park, similar to the Friends of Havenwood Park. We've heard interest in that sort of a group. And so this would be to support those groups to self-establish and self-sustain over time.
Okay, and so just for clarity then, so we're talking about really helping prop up and create local grassroots kind of groups. And is it 20K per kind of category you've identified here? Is that, am I correct, or is it overarching?
It's $20 per group is what we're proposing here in this budget ask.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Olson and then Councillor Georgeson now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Councillor Grove and I were actually discussing this earlier and trying to determine, so would we be looking at sort of an either or scenario? You look at potentially considering a part-time volunteer coordinator that could be working with these groups at that budgeted amount of 50,000, or we perhaps put that off and then look at supporting individual groups at this amount. So it's kind of we're not looking at all of it
Well, what we're
together.
sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
that's
What
okay.
we're proposing is all of it at this point, but it's a bit of an a la carte situation for council to consider. The ideal situation from our point of view is that we have a volunteer coordinator position here at the city of Colwood. A half-time position would implement our volunteer plan at a slower pace than the full-time position would have, but will enable that work to happen over time. We also recognize the interest in the community to develop these groups, and we've heard specifically about some of these through our engagements. And so the potential is for both to happen, that we help these groups establish themselves, and we have the support here at the city to continue the work over time and develop additional groups as they emerge, because my sense is that as soon as the city starts engaging on volunteering, we'll see an overflowing of interest, which is what we've heard through the household prosperity survey. There's a strong interest.
I thank you. Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, there's a significant percentage of people that from that survey that resulted that were looking to volunteer their time. And even just with the baseline survey, there's still several hundreds of people there that were in the community looking to volunteer. I think I'm just concerned overall about it's $130,000 investment to do, establish those groups and then have a coordinator.
Mhm.
But I do think there is a need personally for at least a part-time coordinator to be working with some of these groups. But thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Jordison.
With all due respect, I'm not sure I fully understand this at all, to be honest. And I think where the work is establishing the volunteer program, I guess. And once that volunteer program is established, it works on its own really, and doesn't require a lot of work after that. So I guess what I'm not understanding is the last time we approved more staff for communications department, it was to help with the events and that sort of thing. And not to be disrespectful, I'm just trying to understand what Brittany does when the events aren't happening, or to me, it seems like there should be some room in either one of the communications job descriptions to get this implemented, and then it kind of just runs itself. These grassroots organizations, I don't think they need help getting set up and stuff. They're there. We just need to know who they are, and I think that's like part of putting the volunteer program together. So I'm just not in favor of the way this is rolling out. I'm very much in favor of having a volunteer program, but I think that I don't think it needs to be this grand. I don't know how else to say it. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is interesting, I think. Let's talk for half an hour about the small item. The other day we went through $1 million items very quickly, but anyway, so the green team has expressed to me that they are looking to expand, and they will do litter cleanups. They will do shoreline cleanup, tree plantings. They have different aspects to their work. They're looking to expand and so on. I think they just signed on with Langford, and Gablecraft just signed them on for some stuff. So anyway, that's all good. But so I'll say that, and then also the community garden folks. I have been meeting a little bit with Gablecraft and them over the idea of getting another one going, trying just initial steps, and it kind of went quiet before Christmas after our last meeting. And I think it's a capacity issue for them, and they expressed the interest in having someone in City Hall who they would coordinate with. I think when I discussed it with them, and it made sense because they're dealing with this garden, but the idea of taking the initiative and getting all of the information needed and the site planning needed, tying in a developer if they're interested in helping out with something, is it's a capacity issue for them. So I get that they can't, it's not that they can't do it, but they're sort of stuck. And they're also at a point where they're ready to pass on succession planning, and they're trying to pass on the responsibility. And it makes sense to me for consistency from group to group, because volunteer groups can fall apart real quick if a key person disappears. So it makes sense to me to have a person at City Hall. The reason I feel it's justified is because there's got to be, and I know with parks, there's some, and I've talked to a few other individuals, there's a lot of side of desk work being done. And I suppose it's too much to add it all up. I mean, that's something that's awfully hard to do, but it makes sense to me that if you did add that all up, you might end up with an actual savings in the end. Because we don't need, I know I spoke, Gord, sorry, I don't mean to put words in your mouth or anything, but I did speak with Gord some time ago about there is a fair amount of complexity involved in coordinating sites. And with different groups, some are efficient, some are a little bit more work. So I like the idea of, I'm a bit, I mean, I can go for a one-off deal for the first year, if this is a transition year, if you think of it that way, into a more established thing, I get it. So I'm fine with it. I just wanted to speak to the fact that from those, the community garden and green teams who I've got a fair amount of exposure with, I think both groups would benefit from someone set in City Hall who they could. And I have a feeling that then your respondent 60 is huge from the small number of surveys, or 500 or whatever. I mean, we might get swamped. How are we going to handle that, and who's going to handle that? So anyway, I think it's a bit of a transition is how I see it. That wasn't a question in there, was it?
Appreciate your comments.
Councillor Olson for the second time.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to state again that I definitely understand where some of my fellow councillors are coming from, but I do feel that there is a need for a part-time volunteer coordinator. And I think when building these programs and working with these community groups, it's important that there is a key person that's kind of dedicated to keeping those groups going. And so while I'm not quite the individual amounts of $20,000 for these groups, I'm not quite there yet, but I definitely would support like a part-time position as a trial period for a year, and just to, reevaluate it again, and see if it's something that perhaps maybe could potentially grow into the future. But I do fully support the part-time coordinator trial position.
Councillor Jordison for the second time.
I guess I just have a different way of looking at it. I guess I'm just thinking, like, if you were to move Eats and Beats and those different events that happen on the weekends out to like an arts and culture group, a volunteer group, and have them work with the budget to manage those things, then we wouldn't have to pay city staff overtime to run these things. And the important things like a volunteer program could be run from the city with the staff that we currently have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've volunteered with a lot of organizations, from small, like the Green Team, to Hear the World, which is an international organization, and spent time in Peru with them and other places. And, managing groups of volunteers is like herding cats. I know it's pretty difficult. So I'm not opposed to, I would call it trialing, the position that you proposed for a year, and see, before it's locked down as a long-term permanent thing. I would want to, see if we get the value over the course of a year. My only question on it really is less about that than it is around the 20K per initiative, just how that number was arrived at. I mean, I'm looking at, that's close to $1,700 a month. And I just wonder, for beach cleanup, I know there's equipment and things required, but we're not paying wages. And, is this to fund staff in support of that, like sending trucks down to pick up garbage that's picked up? I mean, I'm just curious as to how the numbers were arrived at there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It was a bit of a ballpark. I think some of the things we forget about when we're talking about volunteer coordination is supplying equipment to people, safety orientation, ensuring safety while on site, recognition. There's a need. Groups often express that they would like a return on their investment of time, and that often is a letter of support, a reference letter, a documentation of their time. So there's record keeping to be done. There's a lot of aspects that we don't think of when we begin to plan for volunteering. You want to pull a group together, and suddenly, what if someone gets hurt? Do we have the equipment we need? How are we going to acknowledge the time and skills they've given. So those are the kinds of things that we considered in addition to just establishing a group and promoting a group when we came up with those amounts.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll end it up with just my comments and questions. I must admit, and this is actually a compliment to you, Sandra. You're tenacious, and that's a good a way of putting it. You're very tenacious, and even my own mind is changing a little bit on this subject right now. I could tell you that 20,000 seems to be a bit far out to me, and the only reason I'm saying this is that I look at the Friends of Havenwood, for example, and once in a while we give them some money under grant and aid sometimes. They don't ask for it every year. And we have other volunteer groups within the city that don't ask for money. They generate some, I don't know how they even generate some of the things, but I think the 20,000 is a bit of a stretch, because I just look at it, I said, well, if it's not for wages, I honestly believe, every city or town I've ever volunteered with, they bought us some snacks, or they bought us a lunch, the sandwiches or whatever, and that's great. And to me, that's such it's a small amount for an appreciation. So I agree with that kind of thing, so I don't see a problem with that. So, but it's just like I just said, that the 20,000, I was just having a hard time chewing on that one. And then I came to my own conclusion that, your tenaciousness, and I think that, I would agree to look at a part-time volunteer coordinator now. I was not in favor of this, but due to you being so tenacious about this, I have to feel that I would support something like that now. And with deliverables, I want to see, because if it is successful, if you're obviously seeing something that I'm not seeing, or some of the council members are not seeing right now. I've been on the other side of the fence, being that volunteer, and then ended up working 40 hours as a volunteer a week, and it didn't bother me, but because I had to do something. So I guess my head is now, I don't think I'd agree with each of these groups that you've done, and I'm more leaning towards that volunteer coordinator, part-time volunteer coordinator with deliverables. And hopefully you come back next year, and if it's approved here, that you come back and say, this is what we've done, and this is the value we produced. And then we can talk about other things here. I would be totally convinced. And I guess that's where I am right now. And but you're tenacious. That's a great way to put this. That's all I have. Any other comments by anyone on council? Go ahead, Councilor Grove.
Thank you. I'd just like to mention, the Green Team has just contracted with Gablecraft for 10 events. It's $30,000. When they work with us, we have the Parks Department puts in time, collects the stuff, takes it away, coordinates to find out what location's best. At the site, they do an education component. They do the safety component. There's people with the first aid that are in the group. They have a tent, they have tools, gloves, snacks. They bring in sponsorship. They have funding from other sources. It's a really big thing. So that's 30,000 for 10 events. 20 gets spent. Yeah. I just context. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. So I guess to conclude this, I guess you guys are looking for some direction on this end, right? So I guess I'd like personally to make the motion that we look at the part-time, the one part-time volunteer coordinator, and squash all this other stuff, and then chew off what you can eat, I guess is what I'm trying to say with this. Improve it. Show me. I'm from Missouri. So that's my motion. Anyone want to second that? Okay. Councilor Olson will second that. Sorry, Councilor Ward. I'm waiting for you to turn on. Councilor Ward.
Sorry, I wasn't quite 100% clear on what the motion was.
So my motion is that instead of all supplying $20,000 for each one of these small groups, I say nay to that, and I say let's hire a part-time volunteer coordinator. We'll let them set the parameters with deliverables show us as a council that, you know, there's value in this right now. If we want to expand it. So that's where my head is right now.
Okay, thank you.
$50,000, I believe, right? That's what I'm suggesting. I said 50 per, is it part-time? So, Jen, help me.
If I may, through the chair. The budget before you is proposing a $50,000 one-time budget to support a trial of a part-time volunteer coordinator position. As you've heard from our team, the intention is that we would return to council to report out on the progress of the trial. And it would be something for consideration in a future service review, whether or not we wish to continue into perpetuity with that service.
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll just discuss, there's a motion on the floor and we'll go to discussion on that. Councillor Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. One is the coordinator position without the other elements then becomes something perhaps a little different. I'm not sure. But I think it makes sense to grow. The second one is concerned that 50,000 is enough, given the different context. Because you're really asking for 130 for volunteer group spend. And then we're now reducing that to 50. Is 50 enough is my question, do you think? For a part-time coordinator to do a pilot, let's see what we can get going this year. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Yes, as I said, a part-time coordinator will do the work described in the volunteer coordinator plan, volunteer engagement plan, more slowly than a full-time coordinator would have, but should be able to establish a good program for the city in the one-year trial. It may take longer to establish the groups that we described here that we've heard about from the community, but we will make as much headway on that work as we can as groups come forward.
Councillor Olson.
Thank you. And Councillor Grove, you were kind of asking some of what I wanted to ask. That $50,000, my question was also, would that cover, I don't know what a volunteer coordinator gets paid anymore. And if that would cover that cost, but also you had mentioned insurance. And so when that person is actually working, they're developing a plan and then they're engaging with groups, there's supplies, there's potentially insurance. So that $50,000 ask, you know, if we agree to that's not going to cover things like insurance and supplies and whatnot. So I feel like that ask needs to be, if we are going to hire potentially a trial, a volunteer role, then that ask probably needs to be a little bit higher to cover those things like insurance. Correct? Or could that potentially come out of another?
I'm thinking the insurance aspect itself likely would be covered by our municipal insurer.
Okay.
It's a matter of this coordinator working with our insurer to make sure all the pieces are in place to cover our volunteers. I think that's my sense of that part of it. But Jen may have more.
Just to add, there was an expectation approximately 10% of this initiative budget would support the additional funding outside of the labor or the contracted component. Yes.
Okay, thank you, Jen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, I find myself somewhere between Councillor Grove over here and you over here, Mr. Mayor. I'm firmly on the fence in the middle. I think if we're going, and I would say that I've moved off my original position. I think like you, I was originally opposed to putting anything into this area. To me, volunteer is volunteer, but I'm also a realist and, you know, there are costs associated with it. So as I said, I support the trial on the staff member. And then I start to question, if you put somebody into this role, are you setting them up to fail if they've got nothing to work with? Now, I think the ask 20K on each one, but if I hadn't made it clear, I think it's a bit of a stretch for me. But I do think a nominal amount is required to have something, and even bare bones, right? At the end of the day, if it's just enough to be able to bring coffee to events or, you know, something like that. So I don't know what that number looks like. to me, it's maybe only as simple as an additional 12K. So you're talking 62,000. So you've got $1,000 in the pot each month that can be spread across the entirety of these groups. You know, I just wonder, are we going to get any value if we're going to fund a position and they're essentially just sitting there twiddling their thumbs and just pitching in with everybody else in a bring your own tools scenario? So that's just my thought. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to do it kind of halfway.
That's a great comment. Councillor Jordison.
I think everybody might be losing sight of what the volunteer program is. And I think the volunteer program is doing the initial scan to see what those volunteer groups are out there and who wants to be part of this. And I think setting up like something on the website that's, you know, when those people need volunteers for their organizations, that they can advertise on there and that sort of thing. And I think it's just a huge coordination of all those groups. But if they all come and we're going to give them all money, you might want to think about that, because there's a lot of volunteer groups out there. And currently some of them get money from grant and aid, some of them don't get money, some of them just, you know, so it's just I don't think that maybe we have the right information, that people have the right information here to make this decision. Like, I don't know what this is supposed to look like. It just needs to be set up as a program. Like, there's job descriptions for each of the groups. It also depends on what the volunteer groups want help with too, like from the city. So I don't know. I'm just having a hard time with it. I think to set it up initially, I think 50,000 could do it. But as for what the city is actually supposed to support these groups with, that's where I'm confused.
That's fair comment. Would you like to respond to that at all?
If I may just add a little bit of the financial implication context in terms of the city's existing operating budgets, we maintain I believe in recent years it's increased to $25,000 a year fee for service funding with a local volunteer group. That information and understanding of that activity was in part what drove the consideration of the proposed $20,000 budget for other such groups that may do similar engagement volunteer activities. So just to add that for context. In addition, we maintain approximately $45,000 a year to support various volunteer nonprofit groups that come forward and seek that through our annual grant and aid process. But just to add a little bit of context in terms of the $20,000 consideration, that is quite reasonable in terms of what we're hearing from existing groups, Greater Victoria Green Team that we're working with, where we do some cost share on the events that are held throughout the city. I don't know if that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are we going to be actually, I'm sorry, and it's not on the subject, but because we're there right now, are we going to be actually looking at that $25,000 of standing? I mean, I was looking in the budget process when we're going to actually be looking at again. It's not really because we don't question it during the grant and aid process, because we're more ranking which ones we're going to give it to, but we never look at the standing ones.
Great question. We don't consider that a standing grant. Rather, it is a fee for service arrangement that is integrated into our core budget. I did speak on it briefly during service review, but we can certainly revisit any of our existing operating budgets and existing arrangements or agreements that we have in place.
Thank you very much. So basically the motion that's on the table right now is for the 50,000. I heard some arguments about maybe it should be more or less. I haven't heard any revised ones, but that, and it was seconded. That's the motion. It is for a part-time. I think you guys can set the guidelines of what you can get for that, and I think it's a good thing to come back and tell us what we're going to get for it. It would be a good idea to start off with, and so that is the motion that's on the table right now. Sorry, Marcy, am I screwing that
My
up?
apologies, your worship. I didn't hear a seconder for your motion.
Counselor Olson.
Oh, it was? Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. I was making the motion just to get this moving. Okay, Counselor Grove?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm thinking about the community garden group because I've talked to them some, and if we are to remove any funding from potential development of that particular group through this motion and leaving it with the coordinator, I can see some pathway to moving something forward because there are but there's a potential site being looked at. There's potential funding coming from a sponsor. And the individuals who operate this one are willing to help the transition. But in the process, it became clear that there's a fair amount of work required on behalf of the city staff to interface with these groups. And I think this is part that I see as being burdensome and expensive to our staff, to us. It's a hidden cost. I'm not sure we could reveal it or find it. So I'm not going to attempt to put a price on it, but it doesn't take long before these funds, if they're targeted for each group, then there's a path forward to establishing them properly and efficiently while the coordinator works with them. There's some call in the groups here of 20,000 here and there of hiring an outside. I suspect that that wouldn't be necessary in this case, is how I thought it would work. So I'm not sure I can support the motion in that regard, because I don't want this community garden thing to wait another year until some sort of a pilot thing gets going, or perhaps it'll happen quickly because this person we hire will be able to pull it off, snap, and but the situations are in place. So I think it's better to try and go with the part-time volunteer coordinator. Is there any potential then for funding? I guess grant and aid is the only other option for groups to come aside from this. If we, is that right?
With current city policy, it's the annual grant and aid process. We do have a couple of fee-for-service arrangements. So where we get that information, we can bring that for council consideration outside of the grant and aid process. Most recently, council resolved $20,000 support for an arts group. So there are a couple of avenues to consider, but typically the annual grant and aid process is the avenue for such groups to receive support.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then on the other hand, the community garden group did not expect funding to come towards them. They cover their ongoing costs once setup is done. That's what the sponsor would have helped with that. Presumably the city could do it for almost very, very little, if anything. Okay. I think I'm still confused, but I'll try to go from here. Thank you.
Counselor Ward.
Going to try to fix that, Councillor Grove. I'd like to see if I can bridge the gap by moving to amend the motion on the floor, Mr. Mayor. I understand where you're coming from. I also understand the other perspective. So I'd like to move to amend it to keep the existing 50,000 to be allocated to support a trial initiative, but add an additional $20,000 one-time fee for this budget year to be split 4 ways between the 4 identified volunteer initiatives listed. And you can word that in a much more succinct way, Marcy, if you'd like. 20K split 4 ways. And I am looking for a seconder.
You want to motivate Councilor Ward at all? Or you said enough on that? Yes, okay.
You want, yeah. There you go. You could just say in the special initiatives presentation. Hey?
Yes, sure. You're in a chat. Yeah, to motivate. Go ahead, Councillor Ward.
Not so much motivate, but for clarification, I just want to be clear that I'm not talking about providing a grant of 5,000 to each one of these particular groups. This would be monies coordinated by the volunteer coordinator to be used if needed for specific actions here. If it's tools to work with the garden people or initial setup, or, you know, garbage bags for the beach cleanup. I mean, I'm not necessarily advocating to spend every dime, and I'm not saying give them 5,000 cash with no accountability. This is strictly to allow for base level initiatives to be undertaken.
I shall open it up for discussion on the amendment. Please, Councillor Grove.
I like the idea, but I think we're just raising the volunteer coordinator figure from 50 to 70. Because it was indicated there was 5,000 already in the 50 to kind of pay for this and that. But that's how I see it, rather than, well, anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jordison.
I'm just concerned that we are picking 4 groups and like, what about the winter shoveling volunteer group that comes forward? Or the baker volunteer group that comes forward? I mean, I can't think of any examples right now, but like, I just think that they all have some sort of, you know, benefit to the community. And so I just don't understand the 4 initial groups. Usually volunteer groups come established and they come with what they have set up. That's what a volunteer group is. And they don't necessarily, I mean, maybe they need some funding along the way, but they are usually quite self-sustainable. So I just don't understand the choosing of the group, and I think it may not be fair.
Thank you very much. Great comment. Councillor Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to complicate things, and I certainly don't want to make an amendment to an amendment, but perhaps we don't need to state that we're sharing between the 4 groups, because we may find that this volunteer coordinator, if hired, works with some other groups or has some engagement with other groups that maybe we haven't thought about, or that just, you know, perhaps we have that $20,000 that is set aside, that is allocated for supplies, for engaging with other groups, not specific to the 4 in the presentation. Like, maybe we should just take that language out of it altogether and just have the $20,000 earmarked for supplies and community, you know, for any of the programs. Starting to confuse myself, but I think I see Sandra nodding her head. So if we keep the 50,000 allocated to support the trial initiative and $20,000 to be allocated to community engagement programs, and just with that, I guess that would be amending an amended motion.
Well, you could do a friendly amendment if
Yeah,
the
okay.
original mover is okay with that. Okay,
Okay.
friendly amendment.
Okay.
We can do anything we want.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, so I'll just wrap this up then, because I don't see any other hands. This is stretching it for me, folks. It's really stretching it for me. But because of the amendment, I guess I can reluctantly with my arms can be twisted on this one. I didn't like the fact that we did those 4 groups, because then it brings into question. I have so many questions about that, because I can look at each of the groups, like the garden group, you know, the benefit to all Colwood, I still can't see that because the people grow the vegetables and it's for their consumption. And so I was having a hard time with that. So we're subsidizing people to do gardening. It's all good stuff. I mean, I support the gardening program. But then, you know, you can look at each one of the groups and go, and then all of a sudden I'd have the problems with Havenwood Park. The Friends of Havenwood Park would come, you're giving them that money, we should have that money. So I was getting I thought, oh, we got the consequences of this decision. I was getting really uncomfortable with this, you know, very uncomfortable. And, you know, if this is open for the Havenwood, Friends of Havenwood, and all of a sudden I'm okay with this. Because the way it's worded right now, I'm okay with it. But it's a real arm twist on me. But I will end up supporting the amendment. So seeing no other questions or comments, I will call the vote on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, just Councillor Jordison. And on the original motion as amended, all those in favor? All those in favor of the original motion as amended? Yeah. And opposed? Councillor Jordison. And that's how it should be. Okay, so we got through that one. You got a new nickname, Tenacious. Go ahead, Jen.
I think our clicker's timed out. Thank you. Next up, we have the Youth Safety and Wellbeing, an initiative that is underway, now overseen by our Communications and Engagement team.
So as you know, Colwood is a recipient of the Building Safer Communities Fund through the Public Safety Canada Ministry. The objective is youth engagement to prevent gun and gang violence. So Colwood has been working with local youth service providers to develop youth engagement programs aimed at engaging youth, connecting them to supportive services and encouraging participation in activities that support their success. So the Safe Spaces program described in the middle years report prepared by local community service providers for the city is underway. That program is administered by our partners at West Shore Parks and Recreation. That's a youth drop-in and supportive services, skills, learning, recreation program to connect youth to healthy habits, healthy people, healthy services. The waitlist management is the program that we've hired a youth coordinator for here at the city. Waitlist management is to create an inventory of all youth services on the West Shore and throughout the region that our youth can connect to. There are long wait lists, as I'm sure you know, for youth services, and kids are falling through the gaps. So this work will be to connect with each of those local service providers, find out who's on their wait list, start connecting those youth to programs that can help them. That may be to the Safe Spaces program, that may be to other programs throughout the region, that may be to counselors, to whoever we can find to help kids manage so that they are on a path to success rather than a path toward violence or other dangerous behaviors. So that work is underway now. This would be to establish a budget to make use of the grant. It is not an ask through our taxation or funds.
Just a quick question. We're all aware of the program. I just scratched my head a little bit. Not saying you can't do the job, but why is this under communications? I'm just curious. Isn't this sort of a community planning thing, or I'm not sure.
Yep. So it's partly a capacity issue. It's partly communications and engagement is the portfolio that we're talking about, and youth engagement. This has the potential to increase the city's capacity for youth engagement. And
I see. I sort of see. Okay. Thank you very much. Good. Please proceed.
Sorry, Marcy. Okay, next up, we do have funding that was previously established under a prior financial plan to support various arts and culture initiatives. In particular, development of a public art policy. Once developed, we would then look to hold a public art competition. As well, there's been an additional $80,000 that has been committed to support the funding for a comprehensive arts and culture plan. We have our Director of Community Planning here to answer any questions you may have on these related initiatives.
Councillor Ward, then followed by me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm looking at the dollar figure on this one, I have to admit. You know, arts and culture, as I said long ago, is part of the fabric of the community along with, you know, recreation and other things. But, you know, we have, I think, provided additional support to the Arts and Culture Colwood Society with awarding them the facility. And I guess what I'm looking for here is, you know, how can we lean on an organization that we've sort of demonstrated support of and engage with in, you know, meaningful way, rather than looking at 80 grand for an arts and culture plan. I mean, this is one where I think the new volunteer coordinator could maybe work with an existing sort of group like that and, you know, and help tap into other resources. So, you know, I'm just, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the dollar figure on this one. I'll be honest with you.
Thank you for stealing my thunder on this one. I am not, I'm having a hard time fathoming this, to tell you the truth. The 80 grand and even the $22,000 for a public art competition. I'm just, it's just a hard pill to swallow. I'm sorry. I just, you know, you know, I guess I need more information before I would proceed with this. I'm not in favor of this right now as it stands. Councillor Jordison?
I just had a question. Is this from like a request from the Arts and Culture Colwood or no?
No, it is not.
Because I think, yeah, well, I understand the arts and culture plan for the city, but I think that they could probably assist with that and not have it cost this much. That's way too, that's a lot of money. So thanks.
Okay. Councillor Grove?
Well, the arts need somebody to speak in their favor. The pickleball court was $500,000. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's arguing the dollar value, but it's just, you know, we, you know, as Councillor Ward has stated, you know, we have a society now. Could they potentially do this for us? I mean, you know, would it cost us $80,000? Would it cost $22,000 if they ran the public art competition? Just questions I have.
Thank you, Worship, if I may. So staff have actually been in touch with Arts and Culture Colwood Society. We had a meeting last year to talk about how we could potentially collaborate on both the public art policy development and the public art competition. The public art competition, that money is actually meant to be earmarked for actual payment to artists to produce art for the community, not so much to administer the program. That was an idea that came out of our initial attempt at getting consultants to help us with a public art plan and policy. We did an RFP in Q4 2022 and didn't get any responses for the budget that we put forward. So the idea was very much to work with internal staff and community groups, and that's why we thought that public art competition could be a piece that we could work with a community group like Arts and Culture Colwood to work with us. I actually spoke with Laura Davis today about, she gave her an update on this item. The $80,000 budget for the comprehensive arts and culture plan was developed with an understanding of how much it would cost to pay a consultant firm to help produce a comprehensive plan. These days, that type of expertise is hard to find. and it comes with a price. So that's why that budget is assigned to the 80,000.
What would be the ramifications if we delayed this for a year and so we just sort of mulled this around and talked about this with Arts and Culture Colwood, you know, to figure out maybe there's a better way going forward? You've had the conversations, obviously, and we weren't part of that conversation, but I guess my comfort zone would be more, I'd like to see more of that, you know, using the volunteer groups right now within the city. I mean, this is why we're establishing this volunteer group coordinator right now. And I see a lot of synergy that could potentially happen right now. We just don't need another independent, someone's doing something over here and someone's doing something over here. So I guess my question is, what if we were, you know, to delay this a year and then come back and relook at this at that time? I don't have a problem with the public art policy itself, that part of it. We can proceed with that and give the okay for that, but the rest of it, I'm just not feeling that comfortable with it, to tell you the truth.
Certainly, and staff could return within a year with respect to additional information gleaned from conversations with community groups. It would certainly, I don't think, take that long for us to come back with additional information.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grove?
Yeah, okay, I won't be quite so snarky this time, but the idea that we can tap into volunteer groups who Councillor Jordanson spoke as how they come to us already operating with their scope of work. Arts and Culture Society has got their hands full with what they're attempting to produce, given what they have planned and what they're growing into. Whether they can contribute to this arts and culture plan, I really don't know. I don't see how that's what they do, but I think it's dangerous to, on the one hand, nurture and grow your volunteer organizations and community organizations, and then on the other hand, start to use them as inexpensive consulting services. I'm not sure that it's fair to them, and then I'm not sure what the result would be in terms of what we get back. I get the sentiment, but again, I will say the 80,000, although here it is, you know, another plan, another 80,000 for some ideas and a plan. I'm not sure. I'm getting used to that idea around City Hall with it's the way information gets gathered and formed. I don't see it as such a big chunk of money. I remember the discussion around art, speaking to the art policy or the public art. We talked a lot during the bridge discussions about public art being available and a place being available. If we can get a sculpture down there for 22,000, I'm thinking more like 122,000 if it's going to be of a scope, scale, and impression that really works. The numbers here and represented by this and what I think is being presented, isn't that outrageous? If we're going to support the arts, if we're going to support that element in our community, which is a big number of people, but they're all very quiet, they're all hidden. You don't see them outside in big sports fields under very bright lights, playing soccer or pickleball or whatever it is they're doing. You don't see them. They're indoors, they're hidden. I'd love to see an act of support shown to that community in Colwood. I think we might be surprised by what comes from that effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, with regard to the 80K, I think my question really is, you know, do we need an outside consulting firm to start from scratch and, you know, build the cake, if you will, with scratch ingredients, right? Mixing it all up from the start, or, you know, why reinvent the wheel is kind of a strategy that certainly works in the private sector. And I wonder, you know, there's a lot of other communities out there that probably have fairly comprehensive arts and culture plans that they've invested significant money in. You know, can we not internally take a look at what's out there and propose a plan? you know, I don't know if all of the plans that we have, we really need to go for external guidance. I mean, we've got a pretty strong group of people here, and in the public realm, this stuff is public. So, you know, maybe we can take a look at what's already there. So if we can do something like that in the interim, you know, that's fine. Otherwise, I'd be, I think, somewhat aligned with the mayor's comments that I'd like to defer it, at least that part, the plan development or the plan finalization, if you will, at least out a year. So that's where I sit on it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Councilor Grove, just to clarify my position on this, I'm not against the expenditure of the money. It's just a matter of integrating it, and great point by Councilor Ward right now. You know, you find out who's got a good one and you go copy it. There's nothing wrong with that, you know, that strategy. So that's where I guess I'm having difficulties with this, because, you know, I looked at the total amount that we're spending under this special initiatives just over $2 million. And I keep on, I'm worried for you. Honestly, you've got to understand this. You know, it's just a matter of, have we bit off more than we can really chew? Because the stuff, you know, it's a lean staff. I see you guys, you know, I see the hours you guys work. You can't hide that from me. And I'm kind of concerned about that. This is just me speaking anecdotally here. But I just hate to see us start developing a lot of these plans for them to sit on the shelf for a couple of years, because we don't have the resources to implement after. So I guess this is the piece that's always missing in these special initiatives. Everyone's got the right intention, and I do understand that we've developed a lot of things, and in the past we've developed them, and now we're bearing some of the fruits from those past things. But you know, you can just do just in time getting stuff done too, you know. And so philosophically, that's where my head is, especially when I'm looking at how lean the staff is here. And you know, I'm trying to make sure we succeed and we can do all these things and be stretched to the limit, and everybody's stressed out, and then everyone leaves, quits. So I'm very cognizant of this. And you know, everyone might smile out there and say, "Hey, you silly fellow out there," but I've seen it. And too many companies, you know, everyone's trying to do things from the side of their desks. So I'm so cognizant of this, and so I'm not protesting it. As Councilor Grove, I fully agree with you. We spend a lot of money on the recreational side and very little in the arts and culture side. And, you know, this is the very first move this year where we actually dedicated a line item for that now. And so, you know, we're just going to grow from that. So, but it's just that I'm okay with, you know, developing the public art policy right now, and perhaps look at a better way of doing this public art competition. And maybe if that's what it costs, that's what it costs. But I think we can just, you know, just in coordination with Arts and Culture Society, work together and maybe look at, you know, what's existing out there for plans, and bring that cost down. So if you want to, please push back. Mr. Barhill, please push back.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we certainly agree with the idea of collaborating closely with existing community groups, especially Arts and Culture Colleague Society. You know, we are envisioning potentially some of this budget going towards that organization, in terms of fee for service as part of the project. We haven't gotten as far as you know, details of that, but we have had initial discussions and they were positive. Have no concerns with respect to deferring the larger piece, the $80,000 budget item. It might not be a bad idea to take initial steps with respect to an art policy in 2024. We think that's probably the most needed aspect of this relative to guiding upcoming projects like the art that's in support of our Golden Goose Bridge.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your honest answer. Do we need Mr. Earl, do we need a motion, or just the discussions? Do we know how to change this then?
Thank you, Worship. Given the discussion here, the clarity of a motion would help staff better understand your intention. Is the intention that the 20,000 for the public art policy creation remain and the remainder be deferred to 2025? If that's the case, a motion to that effect would be helpful.
I think the very first part of it is what I was okay with, you know, even the public art competition, because I understood the importance of it, but the 80,000 to
So
defer.
a motion to defer the 80,000 budget for the comprehensive arts and culture plan to 2025 would be helpful for clarity if
Okay.
that's your intent.
Okay, Councillor Ward,
I would like to motion a motion that sounds eerily similar to what we just heard from our CAO to defer the latter part, the comprehensive arts and culture plan funding to 2025, and keep the 42,000 for public art policy and public art competition.
perfect. Seconder? Okay. Councillor Olson seconds it. And I'll open up this discussion on the motion. Councillor Jordison.
Can I make a friendly amendment?
Sure.
I was just, the second part, I think it was the second part, was the develop a public art policy and public art competition in conjunction with working with the Arts and Culture Colwood.
Yes. Do I have a seconder for that? Oh, this is not, she's making an amendment.
Is it a motion?
Yeah, a motion to amend.
It
Yeah.
was a friendly amendment.
Oh, was it? Okay, friendly amendment? Oh, sorry. I didn't understand.
Make a motion.
Okay.
I can't make motion.
Well,
it's
no,
a
he
motion on the floor.
doesn't agree to the friendly amendment. So you can make a motion to amend.
No, I'll leave it alone. I just don't know why we wouldn't work with the group that we have put front and center to do this work.
Any other discussion on this? Councillor Ward.
I think just for clarity, Councillor Jordison, I think Arts and Culture Colwood, what they're doing is working to articulate or implement what we're presenting as a vision. And I see the development of the actual policy, like policy work should come from staff. Public art competition, I think, could be held in conjunction with them and or other groups. And certainly would be open to that. And my expectation would be staff would probably explore that. I mean, maybe you could speak to that. But I think policy development should stay with the staff group. That's why I didn't agree to the friendly amendment.
Comment, Mr. Borhill?
Thank you, Worship. Certainly, our intention is to explore potential collaboration with Arts and Culture Colwood on both aspects. Potentially, there's public engagement that could be creatively imagined involving artists with respect to gathering community input on potential policy that organization can help us with. So we're open to creative approaches and certainly appreciate the comments relative to working with existing groups.
Thank you very much. Is that okay with you? Seeing no other discussion, does everyone understand what the motion is on the floor then? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Grove opposes. Okay, we'll move on.
So next up, we've got our First Nations protocol development. As council knows, the city has been meeting with representatives of the Songhees, Cossapsum, and Sianu nations to explore ways in which we could build relationships and support each other's communities. As you also know, Desiree Givens has been project managing this initiative and doing a fantastic job. Songhees and Cossapsum nations have both proposed that next steps include the drafting of contribution agreements that would compensate the community members for participation in the process. Therefore, recommending this budget also be used to fund such agreements. So that slide does not reflect that information. Apologies, that came a little bit late in terms of this process, but we're looking at potentially as an initial discussion, $10,000 contribution agreements to aid this work.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on, please.
So as council may also recall, we updated the city's heritage heritage inventory in 2021 and undertook a process to develop a draft heritage strategy. Public engagement resulted in the protection of Indigenous heritage being identified as a top priority for Colwoodians. And in 2022 and 2023, staff advanced discussions with the Cosapsan and Songhees nations on that subject accordingly. These conversations are expected to continue this year, and we are hopeful that we'll be in a position to bring the draft strategy back to council in Q4 of this year or first quarter of next.
Please move on.
Next, I will invite our Manager of Human Resources to comment on an initiative that is intended to occur in 2027.
So this special initiative, as Jen has pointed out, is proposed for 2027. It's a similar special initiative that was carried out to one that was carried out in 2021. And as council will recall, our compensation philosophy, which council adopted in 2023, commits to a market compensation review every 3 years. Recently, as one of HR's top 3 priorities for 2024, during service review, council has endorsed an external market compensation review, which was described as a refresh approach, which could be characterized as more of a health check or a pulse check to ensure that the framework we put in place in 2021 is on track. And therefore, as such, for 2027, it's expected that at that point, a more in-depth organizational design, job evaluation, job classification, and compensation review would be due at that point.
Please proceed. No questions.
With that, we'll move over to finance. This is a new initiative for consideration. We are proposing funding to support consulting services. And I'll turn it over to Kathy to articulate a little further about what we intend to do here.
Thank you, Jen. So this initiative is, the goals are really to support our commitment to continuous improvement and efficiency. And so we've spoken before about the various tools that we have and the challenges that we experience delivering the high standards. So we are hoping to use consultant services to help us leverage technology that we already have access to, because there's a lot of developments out there that we are not currently leveraging, such as AI and Power Automate, which we're just using a little bit of at VBA. There's ways that we can use the information that we're already building and transfer it to the end documents that we are trying to use. We're doing a lot of that manually today. So, and we really don't have the capacity to invest in doing this all on our own. But once we have that helping hand, our team has the skill to carry it forward and to keep implementing, and hopefully we'll get to dashboards and a lot of cooler delivery tools for council and public and internally. This will support not just finance resources, but all resources, so that the process is much smoother and easier and less manual effort. So the final outcomes would be less staff resources and efficient ways that we're building this content.
Great. I'm all for that. So is that enough money though?
Well, I think so. Our team is pretty skilled, I would think. So we just don't have the time, unfortunately, to invest in this area. And part of this is also about upskilling staff. Sorry, I talk with my hands too much. Upskilling our staff and the knowledge transfer. So that's a super key, concept within our team. So it's a good start, and we'll be back before you next year if we need more. And hopefully we'll be demonstrating to you results from this initiative this year.
Thanks very much, Kathy. See no questions, we'll proceed.
On a similar note, in terms of supporting deliverables that tend to be led by our team, we did set aside funding last year to support enhanced performance metrics. So the intent here is that we can bring options forward for council consideration, ways that we can add context for deliverables such as the service review documentation and presentations, additional information outside of financial results to support decision-making when it comes to levels of service, when it comes to budget allocation and that sort of thing. So this is work in its early days and we intend to continue it through this year.
Proceed.
Every 2 years, we set aside funding to support the necessary orthophoto updates for our GIS team. So most recently, we updated this imagery in late 2023, and this is funding set aside for the 2025 year. And our GIS manager is on the meeting remotely, should you have any questions with respect to this.
Yes, good evening. This is a partnership we do with Capital Regional District. It's all the local municipalities partner in. So we get a great economy of scale here and that we're all covering the same area. In addition to the photos, we also get an updated contours of 1 meter, building outlines, as well as we get the road edge outlines as well that are going to be quite useful for our asset management program.
Thank you. I don't see any questions here, so we'll proceed.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to a number of initiatives led by our community planning team. And I will turn it over to our director, Ian.
Thank you. So next up is our biodiversity project. This project is a priority coming from our climate action plan. It would result in a baseline assessment of Colwood's biodiversity. Based on recent direction from council stemming from a recommendation from our Waterfront Stewardship Committee, the budget was increased to include a human impact assessment of the Esquimalt Lagoon. Pause there for any questions.
Okay, so no questions. Okay, thank you. Next.
So next up is another climate action.
Sorry. Thank you. Councilor Grove.
The Environment Committee, we talked about, or was it the climate or the waterfront stewardship? I think Ian, you spoke to the idea of a biodiversity study lagged on to what we were already doing or as another funding source. There was something there. Sorry, it just popped into my head last second there. And I was just curious, I did make a note here. If, because I see the funds are from the climate reserve. Can you speak to that further? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilor Grove. So you may be thinking of some comments I made relative to our what I'll be speaking to later is our potential contribution agreement with Parks Canada. Yeah. One of the projects that we proposed that they would co-fund with us is this project that would allow us to free up some of the LGCAP funding that's been allocated to this item.
Right. I think that's what I was thinking, wondering if that tied in with this. Okay, cool. Thank you.
So next up is what we're calling climate action initiatives. This item is to earmark the balance of our LGCAP. That stands for local government climate action monies from the provincial government. It's meant to implement various actions called for by the climate action plan. And this money is required to be spent by the end of March 2025. Staff will return later this quarter with a report on options for council to prioritize with respect to funding specific climate actions.
Okay. Any questions? Next.
Next is an initiative we're calling Coastline Studies. It was at one point in the budget called Coastal Adaptation Work. It's roughly the same in its intention. The project has been on the books for a couple of years now, and it's intended to follow on the completion of the Waterfront Stewardship Plan, and as well as the associated coastal engineering work with the Waterfront Stewardship Plan. It would revise coastal flood hazard mitigation regulations that are currently based in the land use bylaw and our official community plan. And it would also complement the city's floodplain and mapping initiative for the coastline. The watershed, I was just giving an update on the waterfront stewardship plan. We expect to return to council in the next several weeks, pending confirmation of feedback from recent engagement with the Songhees Nation.
Okay. No questions. Please proceed. Next.
Next, I'd just like to pass the mic over to our senior planner, Matt Blakely.
Thank you. So the next item is the Colwood land use bylaw update. This funding request would address a collection of council prioritized updates, which are intended to improve key components of the Colwood land use and sign bylaws. The most recent updates to the land use bylaw were done in 2021 and 2022 when the off-street parking regulations received several updates. The 2024 updates would focus on addressing legislative changes resulting from the province's Bill 44, which is the Housing Statutes Residential Development Amendment Act, and where required, Bill 47, Housing Statutes Transit-Oriented Areas Amendment Act. The city is proposing to fund the remaining update projects utilizing the recently awarded provincial capacity building grant.
Okay. So don't see any questions. Please proceed.
Okay. So the next item is the Colwood Rent Bank Program. Council approved the Community Social Planning Council of Greater Victoria's request to assign $30,000 annually to support the Colwood Rent Bank Program for a 5-year period. This started last year. The Rent Bank provides financial assistance in the form of low-fee, no-interest loans to low-income individuals and families experiencing a short-term financial crisis, which impacts their ability to keep up with monthly living costs.
I have a quick question because it started last year, right? And so are they coming to brief us to sort of say this is the results after the first year?
Sorry, I had one more line there. That's my fault. So the city recently received a report at the end of last year, 2023, from the Community Social Planning Council outlining the recent performance of last year, and council will be updated on that very shortly.
Super. Thank you.
If I could just add, Your Worship. So the council resolution that was made last year included a requirement that there be annual reporting. So as Mr. Blakely stated, that report, I believe, has been posted to a council's reading file this evening.
Thank you.
The next item is a demographic study. So this funding request would allow the city to hire a qualified consultant to assist the city with the review and update of the demographic and land yield study, which was conducted in 2022. This initiative funds biannual updates in order to ensure that current and accurate data is available to assist with decision making.
No questions, please proceed.
So this next one is related to the 4 community groups that was intended to be supported by the volunteer coordinator position. This is once again a trial project intended to dovetail with those other volunteer community group projects. It was intended to facilitate community action around the city's climate and energy efficiency goals.
Any comments from council on this one? Okay. Next, please.
The next initiative is the Gateway Public Realm Plan. So this initiative was approved in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan for 2023. The initiative provides funding for a qualified consultant to assist the city in the creation of a public realm improvement plan for the Gateway area. The first phase of this project was completed last year and resulted in the Colway, Gateway, and Triangle Lands Vision and Action Plan. The intent for 2024 is to build off and support the implementation of the phase 1 action plan with a public realm improvement strategy that includes coordinating placemaking improvements with future transit, walking, rolling, and cycling infrastructure improvements, as well as providing direction on private signage and streetscape designs. The deliverable for phase 2 will include a 10-year project cost estimate and projections consistent with the city's asset management program.
Council Ward?
Just a quick question on that, because the gateway area falls into one of these new zones as prescribed by the provincial government for high density and all the rest of it. Does that change anything in terms of, you know, what we have to do in terms of the plan? And really where I'm going with it is funding wise, with the province dictating what has to happen, you know, is there money available potentially, you know, to apply to this, if not now, certainly in future? I don't know if that's even a known, to be honest with you, but curious.
Your worship, if I may attempt
Please.
to answer that, on a recent workshop with the province, when they were discussing bills 44, 46, and 47, a similar question was asked of the presenters, and the answer was the province recently released over $1 billion to communities for infrastructure to help them prepare for bills 44, 46, and 47.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Earl. Appreciate it.
Please proceed.
And if I may, Mayor, I think council should look very well on this project and council's decision to support it, in that it supported pre-zoning and was very much in line with what the province is asking us to do. So the next item is our inland floodplain mapping project. This is develop a comprehensive inland floodplain map for Colwood to complement the existing coastal floodplain mapping. This will involve the engineering department and be heavily informed by the recent updates to the stormwater master plan.
So the next initiative is the official community plan review. I know this was discussed quite a bit in the service reviews. So as proposed, we have spread funding for the OCP review between 2024 and 2025 in recognition of the potential for this project to require significant public and partner consultations depending on council's direction on the strategic directions for potential amendments.
So just make sure I'm clear. You said we spread it over 2024 and 2025? Or
correct?
Okay.
And that's partly because some of the public participation takes a long time.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
So the next initiative is a police DCC bylaw, development cost charge. So this funding request is for $25,000 to hire a qualified consultant to assist staff in the development of a new development cost charge program for policing facilities. This DCC would cover Colwood's share of the RCMP building. So just a little bit of background, DCCs for police facilities were previously not permitted, but recent legislative changes, specifically Bill 44 for development financing, has established amendments which allow the creation of DCCs for police facilities. We're in a unique situation because if the city moves quickly on this, Colwood has the opportunity to establish the province's first DCC program for police facilities.
Oh, sorry about that, Councilor Ward.
Maybe for the CAO, Mr. Earl, you'd explained it to me in, I unfortunately don't have it in front of me, but basically with us funding through the CRD program, we would then be able to, well, we're paying that way, but then we apply this DCC, get the money, but the taxpayer at the end of the day would still see the benefit in terms of essentially like a charge back. I don't know how to describe it, but maybe I'm thinking for clarification because it wasn't asked, but certainly my question, had you not explained it to me previously, would have been, well, if we're going through the CRD on this, but yet we're getting the money here, how does that money make its way back to the residents ultimately, or is it being applied elsewhere? So I think just for public awareness, we should clarify that.
Thank you, Councillor Ward, through your worship. We're continuing to work through the details, but the fundamentals are Absent a DCC, the CRD charge to service the debt and interest on the police building once constructed would flow through to Colwood taxpayers as part of a CRD charge on Colwood bills. If we get a DCC in place, Colwood would subtract from those bills in a given year the amount collected in DCCs in the previous year, and that subtraction would reduce the impact or negate the impact on Colwood ratepayers.
So the next initiative is an ongoing one. This is the Regional Housing Affordability Project. Regional Household Affordability and Prosperity Project, known as RHAP. So this is a regional initiative led by the City of Colwood in partnership with Community Social Planning Council of Greater Victoria, the City of Victoria, and the District of Saanich. So in phase one, this was an intermunicipal community of practice was established with a focus on local action for housing affordability. Phase two, which was initiated in 2022, 2023. Phase two of this saw the addition of Esquimalt, Oak Bay, and Langford as municipal partners and community of practice members. So this initiative builds on existing housing needs reports, recovery and prosperity strategies, and indexes to bring focus to housing poverty and provide pathways to affordability. Overall, the project is helping prioritize household prosperity and economic resilience within the participating municipalities and across the region. The 2024 deliverables include a tenant assistant policy and a housing strategy. Furthermore, on January 8th, Council endorsed making an application for the Complete Communities Grant, which would fully fund phase three of this project.
So next up, we have another a climate project or residential retrofit strategy. So to meet the city's goals of achieving net zero by 2050, the Climate Action Plan targets 3% of all residences to be converted to heat pumps and 6% to undergo energy efficiency retrofits every year. This equates to approximately 230 heat pump retrofits per year and 460 efficiency retrofits annually. Data from the province suggests that we are likely seeing retrofits at less than half these rates right now. So this project would develop a comprehensive strategy for the city to incentivize and accelerate residential retrofits and meet our climate targets. Success in this area would eliminate roughly 20% of our total community emissions attributed to residential buildings, or approximately 16,000 tons of CO2.
So I'm not one to try to increase a budget, but is this one that we could target? Seeing as it's such an issue, it's a big cause of our GHGs right now, right? So is there wiggle room to increase this budget maybe to 100?
Thank you for that question, Your Worship. So this budget was developed through conversations with consultants that prepared a similar plan for the District of Saanich. We believe it's sufficient to tackle the scope of works. It is being proposed to be funded through the Provincial Climate Action Reserve Fund. So that same fund is being earmarked to that the general initiatives that we'll be coming back to council with. So certainly if we found that additional monies was required for this fund, we could advise council when we came back over that future report.
Sends the right message, right? Because just on the stats you gave me right now, I'm just going, not doing enough. So anyways, Council Ward.
Yeah, I'm just, obviously I support the objectives, just put in a heat pump myself, but I'm curious what we're trying to do. You said incentivize people to make that switch. So, are we just simply pointing to like the hydro and federal rebate programs? I mean, as a municipality, funds are limited. We obviously can't really provide any kind of meaningful grants there. I mean, when you look at the cost of it, I mean, like I say, having just gone through it myself, you need to hand somebody thousands of dollars for it to really be meaningful. So is this just an awareness campaign? I'm just curious what we're trying to put out there.
Thank you for that question, Council Ward, through your worship. It's a really good question. This is not going to be an easy plan. In terms of the challenge ahead, we're going to have to come up with new solutions. We haven't figured out beyond what other municipalities have done, and we have to say a lot of them revolve around similar tactics to providing top-ups. So the city provided nominal top-ups to the existing Clean BC subsidies for people doing conversions. But we think there's potential for us to talk to homeowners such as yourself who have recently made conversions, see where the issues lie relative to potential impediments, talk to people who haven't made the conversions, what's stopping them. There could potentially be a concierge service proposed that would see city funded or community representatives that are helping people walk through the process. Certainly our family found it tricky when we converted to a heat pump, and having potentially a third party help with that could be an option as well.
Development services, I guess. I'm going to take a 4-minute break here. I'll recess for my health break.
May I borrow your file?
Okay, I'm going to bring us back from recess. Marcy, whenever you're ready.
Hey, your worship, I'm just checking with the big boss to make sure there's nothing she wanted to date or anything with regards to the financial plan. Don't want to step sideways there. First up, this is development services part of the program. We're somewhat less busy than community planning when it comes to special initiatives. First, one up for consideration is amenity cost charge program. This is a result of the new legislation that the province has come out. It's actually kind of exciting and somewhat daunting at the same time. I think the excitement part is it really allows us to figure out what we're going to do and where we're going to spend our money. And basically anything that's not DCC eligible, we have the ability to perhaps move forward, plan for it in the future, and then see what we need to do. So this program will actually wait until we get a little more better handle on the provincial legislation and the impacts. But once we get that figured out, then we'll move forward with this and get our program together. And it will happen quickly because legislation is coming forward pretty quick. Right. Second one is pretty well along the same vein with regards to the bonus density framework. This is just work related to figuring out if we're going to go to a higher densities, what that looks like, what the premium is to get that density, and how we'll be able to respond to that. Previously, when we gave developers extra density, we would ask for higher amounts of amenities or different amenities. Now with the new provincial legislation, that program is probably going to change. So once we get a better handle on that, we'll figure out that program and ensure the citizens represented fairly. Latoria VMP visioning. We've been through the first round of that visioning with regards to Latoria between Wishart and VMP. This is just to carry that program on into 2024, continue that engagement with regards to the public, the area residents and the developers. We are continuing to get interest on that corridor for those properties. And this will help us decide how we're going to move forward in the future with regards to development of those lands. Up next is the engineering portion, and I think I have a partner here for this one. Joshua and I are tag team in this one.
Thanks. Good evening. So this is a bit of a legacy program for the engineering department. This is also a carry forward from our 23 financial plan request. So back in 2015, we had a plan established for our bridges and culverts. And I think through staff turnover and resources, we're not able to action that. We'd like to do it this year. We have a small budget. It'll be sort of the first step in about a 5-year plan to get that. There's some recommendations in the 2015 plan. Also on top of that, we'll be working with the GIS and our new asset management software to enter all these assets and the relative requirements for repair and maintenance. The engineering standards and specifications, this is a continuation of our update for the subdivision servicing bylaw. Essentially complete. We just have a little bit of remaining funding in case there's any minor changes as it comes through to committee. The plan right now is for the infrastructure committee on February 12th, and staff will be bringing it forward there and then continue the process. Similarly to the first item relative to the bridges and culvert program, the geotechnical monitoring is also a bit of a legacy program. There was a report done, I think it was in 2018. We leveraged that last year in 2013, got an update and a focus report done on the 15 highest criticality walls. We'll be using that information in that report that was received in December to create a small capital plan to action any repairs and maintenance required. So staff are actively reviewing that 2023 report on the 15 items that are of highest consequence, and then working through the repairs required there. Oh, and we'll also be entering those into our asset plan as well.
And this is a multi-year program to take care of all 51 walls throughout that program.
Thank you.
That's an eye opener. I didn't realize we own 51 retaining walls. Wow.
Yeah, public assets. For the Lookout Brook Dam Safety Report, so this is to remain compliant with our provincial regulations. We have the Lookout Brook Dam. There's, based on our consequence and category of the dam, we have certain reports that are due for us, it's every 10 years. We're up and we're due. So there's 3 reports and or plans that we need to update this year. So this is funding to get those completed.
So that wasn't done when we did all that work on the dams. Then we didn't do anything at that time.
No, there's a report written based on those works. Those works were based on upgrading the dam based on the previous report, but the reports that are required by the regulations weren't updated at that time. It's just the work was done. Now we can update it, incorporate the new infrastructure installed.
Understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For the road DCC bylaw, so in 2023, we've done 90%, 99% of the work for a minor update. I think we've spoken to council about that, where you can go in for a minor update based on inflation. That work is nearing completion. We'll be coming forward to council to share the findings there. We're hoping for about a 10% increase on the rates there. And then based on the findings from the TMP update, we may pivot and bring forward a major update to the DCC program as well. Just again, not knowing the intersection treatments, where we're widening, cost could be significantly different. It could be to Colwood's benefit to update that plan in a major way sooner. Currently, the budget is held for 2026 to do that. But again, based on the TMP, we may bring that forward.
Next up is the Storm Sewer Master Plan. We've presented to council in 2023. The plan was originated in 2018. 2023 will just see us do the modeling work that basically helps us with the flows and the hydraulics analysis of the plan. Once that's completed in 23, then, or in 24, in 25, we'll then do a full scale update of the plan and go through, and that'll also help us with regards to our asset management, our ongoing construction projects. In the meantime, we do have placeholders within the capital program to do a couple of our projects ahead of time. Next up is the traffic management program. Formerly, it was called the Traffic Calming Pilot Project, but we've been doing the pilot for several years. It does not seem to be going away. So we decided to actually call it a program. So it's basically the same. We've changed it. We feel it's more exciting to be a program than a pilot. And depending on where it goes and what we end up doing, a couple of the things that we have done, I think that'll help us in the future is that we have bought some portable traffic counters. We're buying speed reader boards. So those kinds of things will help us influence the program moving forward. And we are looking at different initiatives. So we may see some changes to this program along the way, but certainly council will be involved in those decisions before we do anything that magnitude. Transportation Master Plan. I hope you remember this one. We started a little briefing in December. We'll be coming back with regards to plans for updating the Transportation Master Plan, in particular, how we're going to go about with public engagement. We'll get some, it was exciting to hear the gentleman the other night at the council meeting with regards to the survey that just came out. And in talking to communications, of all the respondents, we had 160 people say that they'd be glad to come back and have further engagement with regards to the city. So we plan to utilize that piece of information and use that to start with the Transportation Master Plan with regards to public engagement. So it's encouraging that I think we can actually bring people in, get some real conversations going with the citizens. So we're excited to explore that as an opportunity. The last one that I think I can speak to in Public Works is here as well to supplement if needed is the Pavement Condition Assessment Program. Currently, we have that program that was started in 2018. Basically looks at our roads, helps Public Works determine whether roads should be crack sealed or actually patched or actually completely renovated. We use it in engineering to help us determine what projects we should do with regards to our underground work, so we don't do the typical you know, pave the road and then dig up the road. We use it with regards to communications with the CRD, gas, hydro, and so on, so that when they're digging up roads, we take a look at our program, and if we see a road that we're going to be digging up shortly, or they have a program, we can help influence when they're digging up our roads as well. So it's slated to be redone in 2024. I don't know about street sign reflective assessment. I have done some work with regards to assessments of the street signs. Oh, Mr. Boyle is here. I know he stepped out. Perfect.
You want to continue?
Oh, you go and I'll.
Okay, I can take this one. So for street line reflectivity, it's an oncoming thing. We found out that it's coming out of back east. The budget request is either to get a consultant. We were talking with somebody. It looks like they're going to try and start it up. Those discussions haven't gone too far. We do know that the piece of equipment is in the magnitude of about $15,000, and we'll see where that goes. It's likely to end up in in-house works. It'll go forward, and then we'll see where that comes from the signage. I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Great, thank you.
I think that's it.
So for Park Trails and Recreation, this is the continuation of the Parks and Rec Master Plan with the individual park management plans. And we are now on to Herm Williams Park, Meadows Park, and now Corey Park as well.
So next up is the aforementioned Parks Canada initiatives. So as I mentioned, we are in negotiations for a second contribution agreement that would likely span 2024 and 2025. That would support work to advance the city's strategic objectives for parks, as well as Park Canada's feasibility studies for potential new urban park in Colwood. If successful, staff expect the contribution agreement in the range of $200,000 to $300,000.
Did we ever, this is a question that was asked to me and I couldn't recall. Has that ever been officially announced yet that it's going to become a national herb? I saw an article, but they never came over and did like an official announcement. Is that correct? That it's going to become a national urban park?
Thanks for that question, Your Worship. So I have to be careful. Really, we're talking about Colwood being a candidate site. Parks Canada refers to this project as the National Urban Park Feasibility Study for Greater Victoria. Yes. They're looking at Fort Roger Hill really being the core of the potential area that could become a future national urban park. Right. Key to this process is what Parks Canada is calling an Indigenous-led process. So key to it is developing a partner table with all the local First Nations who are involved. That work, we understand, is going well, and we're hoping to move forward with us being at that partner table with the Chanu, Songhees, and Kasapsan First Nations.
Okay, because it's just from a comment that was submitted from the public, about our strategic plan and why we didn't mention it, because at that time I didn't think it was public, that we could say that it's a national urban park. So I just, because we're talking publicly about it right now, right? So but I've never ever heard someone officially say it is. Do you know offhand? Anybody?
So Your Worship, I think it's appropriate to describe it as a candidate site for a future national urban park.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now I understand this candidate.
So next up is the Parks Canada Initiative Planner. So this would be a continuation of our auxiliary parks planner position, one that would be funded through components of the contribution agreement with Parks Canada. This role would be required to assist Parks Canada with the various aspects of their feasibility studies, which includes scoping of potential national urban parks lands in Colwood, as well as community engagement.
No questions, please proceed.
So lastly, for Parks, Trails and Recreation is their waterfront planning and parks lease. So the city operates much of its waterfront parks along Cobourg Peninsula through leases with the province. This project would extend the park leases all the way to the beach lands and the waterfront parks that are planned through that development, and integrate the south end of our shoreline with the existing waterfront park system.
Questions? Thank you.
I've got good news. I'm the last one. This is the sewer network expansion plan. We in 2024 came to council with an update and adoption of the sewer master plan. This is just a program that council asked us to look into with regards to future increase of sewer system and deleting septic fields, and coming back to council with regards to a matrix to determine areas to go, and a program that we suggest and how we achieve that expansion in the future. So you'll see that sometime probably in Q2 of 2024.
Sure. See no questions. Thank you very much. So you're just going to do the summary right now? Thank you.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. So with that, that concludes our team's presentations of the special initiative budgets. Tonight, we heard two specific directions from council, and so we will amend future draft budgets to reflect those two council resolutions with respect to the volunteer coordinator and with respect to the arts and culture initiative. At this time, I will say we have previously published the majority of our first draft of the financial plan, excerpts both the capital plan and the service plans. Tomorrow, we will publish the first consolidated plan. This is a plan that is prepared in-house, and it is prepared by our communications and engagement team with support from our teams. Next week, we will return to review highlights of the plan. If there's any specific direction or specific change that council wishes to direct tonight, please do so. Otherwise, you'll have some time before we next meet, which is scheduled for Tuesday, and then we will continue the conversations. We're scheduled Tuesday evening and Thursday evening next week if you believe we require it. Next steps would be to return with a draft financial plan bylaw. Please answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, you'll see the agenda package tomorrow morning to continue this discussion and review next week.
So another presentation, well done. It's it was easy to follow. I guess I do have a general question. You know, last year when we had all the, you know, it's almost a check on how we did, you know, with all the special initiatives that we had, how many did we actually do? Like, did we complete? We had a certain dollar value. I remember that. And then we never ever get that reflection back to sort of say, you know, we did everything we said we were going to do. So I'm not too sure. And I don't know, you know, you can't really tell what's a carryover and what isn't. Sort of in some of them, they're implied. But so I guess why I'm asking this question, there's a reason I'm asking this question. It's just that it's just, there's so much work. And I realize it's not staff, you know, but you're still managing all these contractors and consultants. So I always worry about that, you know, is this overload and you guys are trying to look, you know, is it too much that you've taken on? I'm just asking the question. It's a fair question. And so past performance, let's start off with that one. How did we do compared to last year?
certainly very fair question. In terms of providing kind of a consolidated comment of previously approved initiatives, I would be prepared to speak to that next week.
Okay.
We really have tonight, we've been providing you with commentary and update on an initiative by initiative basis. But certainly next week, I can provide a summary of, the prior financial plan included this many initiatives, this many are underway and in progress, this many are complete. Be happy to do so. And keep in mind, as you heard from our teams tonight, there's also a number of programs that are integrated within these works. We'll comment, there was a great point made tonight about understanding the capacity link between our teams and these initiatives. So with the financial plan document, you will see the detail by service area to get it, but an improved understanding and just a confirmation in writing of the teams that oversee these specific works as well.
Thank you very much. And if any other comments, Mr. Earl, before I wrap it up? Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn then? Okay, Councillor Jordison, Councillor Grove, seconds. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carried. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Well done.
Sorry.